Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my first season. Greg and I met during Greg's first season in Turquoise in the summer of 1994, but my first season was in Cancun in summer of 1988 as Stage et Gestion. That season was cut short due to Hurricane Gilbert, but that first season changed my life. I knew then and there that I wanted to work for Club Med for more than just one season. I ended up staying in Club Med for 18 years, during which time I met and married my wife of 29 years now, Juka. And we only left Club Med in 2006 because we felt we needed to provide a more stable lifestyle and better education for our son. I was lucky enough to travel extensively and actually worked at more villages outside the American zone than in the American zone. Fun fact, I am the longest serving American in my position in the history of Club Med. And my name is Steve, and this is my first season.
Steve, how are you, sir?
Greg, it's been a long time.
Oh my God. Yes. I'm so happy that I remember you and I remember talking to you for my first season, and I'm so glad that you agreed to come on and share your story because I always liked you. I don't know if you knew that.
I guess so. I mean, I know we talked a bunch of times because I was down with Scuba a lot, and
and
we had a little bit of work together.
Yeah, I had so many bosses there. I had the chief of Scuba, the chief of sports. I had you because Scuba Gestion was a new job that came about in '94 when Club Med started charging for scuba diving, and since you were the Gestion, I had to give you my money.
Right, just on the administrative part, but that was great. That was cool.
Yeah. So you ready to light this fire, Steve?
Let's do it.
Because I probably know virtually nothing about your background. So if you want to take me back in time to where you were living, what you were doing, and how'd you find out about Club Med?
All right. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, so the state of Maryland, but right outside D.C. And I had seen Club Med commercials on TV or heard them on the radio from time to time. I studied international finance at Georgetown University.
Really?
And yeah. And then my college roommate and I decided to go backpacking for a year in Europe. So we flew over to Europe and we did that for a year. But on the way, like in train stations or in trains or at youth hostels or whatever, we would bump into GOs or ex-GOs that would tell us about Club Med. And these were mostly European GOs, but some others were American and such. And they would tell us, every 6 months we go from country to country and place to place. And, with this backpacking trip, I really fell in love with traveling. And so I got the bug. And when the money ran out after about a year, flew back home. I called up Club Med, got myself an interview and got lucky, got a great job, a great career.
Now, can I back you up to Georgetown University?
Yes.
I assume you were there in the 80s. Now, who was the big basketball player, the big man on campus then? Did you see any of those basketball games?
Well, my freshman year, we won the entire NCAA championship. So the person you're referring to is Patrick Ewing.
Yes, Patrick Ewing. So you were around the time that Ewing was there?
Yes, he was a junior. I was a freshman.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
So my first year, we won the whole thing. The second year, we got to the finals, but we lost. But it was an amazing time to be there, obviously, because of the basketball.
Yeah, I mean, that was huge. I mean, I think people were watching those games more than NBA games.
I certainly was.
Now, with all these people you were meeting while you were traveling, how did you, since, this was the mid to late 80s, there was no internet. So how did you find out actually how to apply? Because even in 94, when I applied, it was this top secret thing, that an ex-GO had to tell me about. So how did you know where to go or how to send a letter?
So one of the GOs who I guess came from the States, and please don't ask me his name because I don't remember, but he said, just, when you go home, call 1-800-Club Med.
What? Really?
Yeah. And so I that stuck in my head, pretty easy to remember. And that's what I did. I don't know if you're planning on asking about the interview process, but it's kind of funny.
Yeah, I am actually. Was it in New York?
No, it was actually in Washington. So
really?
I called 1-800-Club Med. They asked me to mail them a resume by snail mail. Back then, there was only snail mail. And so I did that. And I got a phone call, I don't know, a couple of weeks later saying, hey, we're coming down to Washington to interview at some big hotel. I don't remember which one. And you're invited. And so it's, whatever this day and this time, please show up. And so I went. I was interviewed by Philippe Auger, who was in the New York office for many years. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He may have been gone by the time you started, but he did most of the offices and excursions and nurses and those kind of positions. And so he interviewed me, and he said, "What would you like to do?" I said, "Well, I love traveling. I want to be. We have there's a list of positions that we could choose from." And I said, "I'd like to be an excursions geo." He said, "Okay. Est-ce que vous parlez français?" And I had no idea what he just said. And I said, "Huh?" He said, "Do you," in his very, very strong accent, "do you speak French?" I said, "I do not." He said, "Well, then you can't be an excursions geo." And
can I ask you just a quick question? Of all the positions, why did you choose excursion?
Because I just felt I wanted to keep traveling. And so I didn't know how much excursions traveled, whether it was on the other side of the beach or to another country. I didn't really know what it involved. I just wanted to travel and travel and travel.
So you did not want to be in an office?
I didn't even consider it. I don't think it was even on the list. That was it. Stage et gestion was certainly not on the list, but there's probably bank and there was probably traffic and planning. And I didn't understand, what planning meant, and, traffic. That could be all sorts of different meanings, Yeah. I had no idea what that meant. So I was like, "Hey, excursions, this looks great to me." So he talked to me a little bit, and he said, "I'll tell you what, I like your personality, but you have to learn French to be excursions. I'll see what else is out there for you, and I'll give you a call." And I said, "Well, I'm going to learn French before you make that call." And he said, "Yeah, right." So I left, and immediately I went into the newspaper, the Washington Post, and I found a French tutor, maybe 3 or 4 miles away, and I took lessons every day with this French lady who lived in DC. And when we got to a point about 2 or 3 weeks later where she kind of coached me. Now, of course, I wasn't speaking French in 2 or 3 weeks, but I did have I had spoken Spanish before. My mom's from Ecuador, so I learned how to speak Spanish already as a kid. And so the conjugation is similar, the grammar is similar, so it was a little bit easier for me to pick up, I think. So we got to a point where she wrote down what I was supposed to say, because I was telling her I have to call this guy back in New York and I have to say something in French. So we wrote it down, and she helped me with my accent a little bit. I called him up. I said those couple of phrases. Okay, I probably said something to the effect of "Bonjour Philippe, c'est Steve. Je parle français maintenant. Je voudrais bien travailler aux excursions du Club Med." Now, of course, my accent was terrible at the time, and at first he didn't remember, and then I reminded him in English because I couldn't respond to what he said. And he's like, "Oh yeah, I remember you." And he says, "There's no way you can speak fluent French." I said, "No, but I'm trying." He said, "I'll tell you what. I'm going to take a real good look at your resume. I'm going to find something for you, and I'll give you a call back within the week." So he did. And so he called me up, and he didn't understand. He didn't know how to explain what gestionnaire meant, or even what stage et gestion meant, or anything like that. So he's telling me on the phone that you're going to go to Cancun, and you're going to train to be gestionnaire. And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Budget, accounting." I said, "Okay, I can do that. As long as I'm in Club Med, I can do that." And so I wrote on a little piece of paper what I thought he said. Now, you're going to laugh because you speak French, right?
Yes.
Okay. J like Jonathan. Eshener. That's what I understood. Gestionnaire. Because I had no clue, right? And this is over the phone, so I didn't know what he was saying. So they send me plane tickets by FedEx. That's the way they always sent plane tickets, as you know.
Yes.
And I had a direct flight. I was lucky. Direct flight, Washington, D.C. to Cancun. Got on a bus with GMs. And, we all lined up in the theater for check-in. It was one of the big check-in days, Saturday or Sunday, whatever it was. And the chief of planning was there. I found out later it was the chief of planning, a woman from Germany. And I said, "I'm going to be here working." And she said, "Okay, you'll be a geo." I said, "I don't know, but they didn't tell me that. I'll be working as gestionnaire." And she said, "What?" And so I took out my paper and I showed it to her. And she said, "I don't know what that is." I said, "It's something with budgets and accounting." And she said, gestionnaire. I said, "I guess." She looked at me and she said, "You don't speak French." I said, "No." She said, I don't think so. I think this is wrong. So she calls over the gestionnaire of the village of Cancun, another guy named Philippe Rouleau is his name. And he said, oh, yes, we were waiting for you to arrive. We're going to be training you to learn how to be my assistant, to be assistant to the gestionnaire. And and from there, I just, I understood what that meant, 1 month in the bank, then 1 month in traffic, 1 month in planning. And then the rest of the season was supposed to be in the gestion office learning with the aide gestion, with the assistant, the role of aide gestion. But we had a hurricane that cut that all short.
Yeah, I always let me ask you a question, because I've always been fascinated by that position. Like, as a geo, especially if you're a sports geo, we're outside. Like, should we have felt bad for you guys getting cooped up in an office all day, or were you good there? Like, I mean, I know you wanted to get in, and like me, I took the first thing. I didn't know what scuba gestion was, but at least I was outside. So, should we have felt bad or no?
So a lot of geos have had that same thought. So I've heard about that before. I had conflicting emotions about that because I studied international finance at a very good university. I wanted to have a real career. I didn't want to, I wanted to make this work, and I wanted to have a long-term career eventually in something with tourism. And if this is where they wanted to place me, so be it. But it happened to be a strong suit for me because that's what I studied. But on the other hand, I felt that I had a quote unquote normal job. And then at the end of the day, I opened up my door and I walked into Club Med, and I can enjoy everything there is about Club Med. So
true. Yeah, exactly.
So there's a balance there. And if you remember, I was very involved with shows, very involved with crazy signs, and I was not your typical gestionnaire at all.
No.
I got into it. I mean, I've had chiefs of the village saying, I've never seen a gestionnaire, get into the entertainment part of this as much as you do.
Yes, that's probably why I remember you more than all the others. That's totally 100% true.
The other ones are boring and they stayed in an office.
That's right. Well, let me ask you another.
At night, they're sitting there, they're standing at the bar, just talking amongst, with them and the econom and the chief of maintenance. They don't talk to anybody else.
That's right. Let me ask you another question. So how long were you there until the hurricane forced? So did you guys have to evacuate?
Oh yeah.
And so how long were you there roughly?
I was there for about 2.5 months. So I did my month at the bank. I did my month at the traffic. Traffic, by the way, was Antonio Fernandez, was one of the traffic geos there. You probably know him.
I've heard the name, yes.
Possibly. Okay. And then I went to planning. And probably after about 5-6 days of planning, we had the hurricane. So we had to evacuate. They had, my memory serves, they were able to contract 18 buses. And that might not, I'm not doing the math in my head. For whatever reason, I remember that number. And they kept on shuttling everybody to I think it was called the Fiesta Americana, which was on the mainland part of Cancun. Okay. Did you do Cancun?
Yes.
Okay. So that the Club Med's on the island. It's on the very bottom of the island. So anyway, we're shuttled to the mainland, to the Fiesta Americana Hotel, and into a huge ballroom convention center kind of place with no windows, no doors, which is the safest place, of course. So they were able to get a bunch of buses. They were able to get the ballroom of the Fiesta Americana. I'm sure that, that was quite costly, but you have to save these people's lives. We had, whatever, 700, 800 GMs plus 140 GOs. And we were all evacuated before the brunt of the storm came.
Wow.
So we rode out the storm for, I guess, a day and a night. I know we slept there. So there's at least one night, maybe possibly two. It was a crazy time.
What did the resort look like when you got back? Was there a lot of damage?
So once the airport opened up, maybe that's why we had to stay a few more days. Now that I remember it, I think we probably had to stay about 3 days. And once the airport opened up, they first sent out all the GMs, and then once all the GMs were gone and on their planes, they had a few buses for the GOs to go back and supposedly help clean up. But it was.
Wait a minute, because I'm getting a little irked here now. What do you mean supposedly? Did you have to or not have to help clean up?
Well, the whatever you call it, the rules, the regulations. I mean, they said we have to clean up the village.
Yes.
That's what we have to do, so we can
Yes.
get our next GMs in, on Sunday or Saturday or whatever.
Yes.
Okay. But we get to the village, it was a mess. It was a disaster. They closed for 8 months. They had to rebuild several buildings. They had to, I mean, it was a disaster. There would have been multiple deaths if we would have stayed. In fact, there were 300 deaths due to that hurricane across the island, not us, not Club Med.
Yeah. And okay, so it did remain closed for 8 months. That's how much damage was done.
It was, there was nothing you could do. I mean,
wow.
I went to my room and my room was full of sand. Okay. I lost all, we lost all our stuff because they wanted us, I guess I left this little part out, but they wanted us to help pack the GMs and get them on the bus. So we had to get the GMs to go to their rooms. We offered to help them pack and get them on the buses as quickly as possible. And some of the GMs, of course, they didn't want to go or whatever. But anyway, so we get back and the village was destroyed. And it was destroyed. There was, the boutique was full of water. The restaurant was full of sand. Even though it was on the second floor, the main restaurant, there was sand on the roof of the restaurant. The pool I have a picture of myself and another GO standing on an island of sand in the middle of the pool.
Whoa.
It was beyond what we could have done as unskilled laborers.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Okay. Well, let me ask you another question. In the 2 months you were there before you had to leave due to the hurricane, you started meeting GOs and GMs from Quebec. So at what point did you realize you didn't speak French at all when you started hearing their French?
Well, even the French I didn't understand because I only studied I took tutoring lessons for 1 hour a day for 3 weeks. So I got to a point where I was able to read off a piece of paper to Philippe Auger on the phone. That's about it. So okay. I didn't speak really anything except for bonjour, bonsoir, just stuff like that. So I did meet GOs from Quebec. I did meet GMs from Quebec, but at that point, I probably didn't know the difference. I didn't learn that difference until I learned French and went to Playa Blanca a couple of years later. So that I really couldn't comment on about Cancun, and I kind of stuck with the Americans because it was easier for me. But I was also trying to assimilate in the culture of Club Med. It was a big shock for me. I mean, coming from Washington, D.C., a very conservative city, Georgetown University, which is a Jesuit Catholic university, quite conservative, and going to Cancun, which is one of the crazier. It wasn't Martinique, but one of the crazier singles villages, was an eye opener. A bunch of Californians, which I wasn't used to. It's a different culture, right, between California and Washington, D.C. So I was trying to understand that and trying to assimilate into the team and trying to be a good GO.
In the 8 months it was closed, did they send you to another resort?
Yes. So I got home, once they realized that we couldn't do anything, they sent everybody home except for the maintenance team, I guess, and maybe the economy. But I flew home. There was already a message on my parents' answering machine that they wanted me to call them right away. And so I did. And they sent me to Sandpiper.
Okay.
And I was kind of bummed because my whole thing was I want to travel. I want to travel internationally. And they said, that's all we have right now. And I was like, all right. And he also said, that'll be the best training for you. I said, fine. So I drove. I had a car and I drove whatever it was, 13, 14 hours from Maryland down to Port St. Lucie. And that was completely different. Sandpiper is polar opposite to Cancun in 1988. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, was it a family village, Sandpiper?
Oh yeah, baby club, petite, mini, everything. Yeah.
Who is your chief of village there? Sorry, in
so Jose Alial.
Oh, okay. Yeah, his name comes up quite a bit during this podcast.
I love him. He was fantastic. So at one of the first GO meetings, he stated, we had received, I don't think they do this anymore. They only did it for a few seasons, but they hired a French teacher for the American GOs. And it was a French gentleman who was living in the United States. And so he was a GO. He was older. He was probably 45 or 50. And Jackie was his name. And he held lessons 3 times a day for I don't know, 30 or 45 minutes. And so Jose says, for all the English speaking geos, if you go to lessons every single day for 6 months, I promise you, you'll get a European village next year or next, the following season. And back in the day, chiefs of village could do that. They can request and their request would be upheld. Whereas, after a few years, that wasn't the case anymore. Paris really ran things a little more than that, or the US office did. But at that time, a chief of village could say, I can promise you, and it can be done. And so we started with like 35 geos. And by the end of the season, there were just 2 of us there every single day.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, were you, when they sent you to Sandpiper, were you still on your stage at Gestion?
Yes. So I had to finish that. They put me directly into the Gestion office. And I don't remember her name. I want to say Julie Epstein. I think that was her name. She was the aide Gestion at the time. And so she and I got along great. And so she really taught me in English. That was her first language. My first language is a whole lot better. We had a French gestionnaire whose English was okay, but not fantastic. But Julie really, she taught me everything. And I learned. And at the end of that summer season, so remember I got there, well, I guess I didn't tell you exactly the dates, but it was September when the hurricane happened. And I got there by the end of September. So I did another, let's say, a month and a half in the gesture with Julie. Then she went off to whatever village she went to. And I stayed on for another 6 months as aide Gestion.
Okay. So, wow. All right.
Yeah. So that was my first season as the aide Gestion.
Did you ask like how much time it would take for you to become the Gestion, or was there a standard answer, or was it like,
so standard answer is 3 to 4 seasons.
Okay.
As aide Gestion, but it depends on a lot of things. The first thing they told me is you'll never be Gestionnaire until you learn French. And so my retort to that was, I'll never learn French if you don't send me to Europe.
Nice. And did that work? Was the promise kept?
Well, yeah, so it was. So the 2 of us, so it made it easier for Jose to keep his promise because he didn't have to deal with 35 people. There were only 2 of us. So there was one sailing geo. Go ahead.
A sailing geo stuck it out. Okay, yeah, I was just going to ask you what was the position of the second person. Okay.
Yeah, it was a sailing geo. I don't remember her name. I don't know, but I know
she was American, I'm guessing.
American, yeah.
Okay.
And she got a village in Tunisia. Mm-hmm. I don't remember which one. And I got Arziv in Israel. And I thought those were
nice.
But I thought that for me, that was perfect for a lot of reasons. Number 1, most Israelis speak English.
Yes.
Number 2, I'm Jewish. Mm-hmm. So to go to Israel, that's special. And Arziv is literally 99% Israeli GMs. There are very few Europeans that go.
Yes, it's usually a lot of soldiers on leave. And as Eric Goldberg, who we both know, used to tell me, they had to check their M16s into the vault when they arrived.
Yes.
So wait,
I had to deal with that.
You were in Arziv in the 80s. Oh my God.
89. Summer of 89.
Wow, yes, must have been fantastic.
So yes, it was really neat. It was a safe year. There were no bombs because there was a bomb. You probably heard about this. There was a bombing in 93 or 94, and there was a butcher who was killed.
Yes. And
then there were more bombings close to the Club Med several years later, and they decided just to close it at that time. But I was there in 89. Nothing happened that year. Thank goodness. We were very close. We're only in Arziv. Yeah.
And
or anywhere in Israel.
Yeah. And it was it's the only Club Med resort that had a bomb shelter, correct?
Yes, we had a bomb shelter. Yeah, that is correct.
And I heard all the Israeli GMs were calm when they go in. They're playing guitars, and I think Eric said he'd be freaking out, but they'd be all like, "Hey, have a sandwich."
Very few people went. I mean, I don't know if maybe during Eric's season they did drills or something, but not with ours.
Yep. Okay.
So all I knew is that we had a lot of stock of like food, in case we did have to go to the bomb shelter. So I had gone in there once or twice during the season just to tour around with the econom or the aide econom and just to see what's there and what we would have to do if we ever had to evacuate to the bomb shelter. So there's a lot of food, a lot of water. There were a bunch of cots, like military cots that were stored, and things like that. But the GMs, not during my year. We never had the GMs in there. I don't know if they had drills other years. Maybe Eric went later, like after the first bombing, and they decided to do that. I don't know.
Did you speak Hebrew before you got there? Did you know Hebrew?
Well, here's the thing. So American, probably Canadians as well, Jews who are not Orthodox, and my family's not Orthodox. You learn how to read Hebrew so you can read the prayers and so you can do your bar mitzvah. But you don't learn the language. Okay. Now, the more you have more religious families where they'll actually put you in a language school or a private school that does half the day in English, half in Hebrew. But my family was very laid back as far as that. So I knew how to read Hebrew. I couldn't have a conversation. And it was funny because sometimes with the Israeli GOs or GMs or whatever, I would mention that because they would ask me, and with my last name, which is very typical Jewish, they would ask me if I speak Hebrew. I said, no, I can read, but I can't speak. And they're like, what do you mean? And so I, pick up a sugar packet or whatever there was printed, the menu or whatever that was part in Hebrew. And I would read it with my terrible American accent. And they'd say, okay, so you know Hebrew. I said, yeah, but I don't know what I just said. Because it's not the same. It's not Latin letters like what we have, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's the the Hebrew letters.
Yeah.
So it's funny because they didn't really grasp the concept. And I said, yeah, we learn how to read to do our bar mitzvah, but we don't learn the language. So while I was there, we were there for a full season. I picked up a bunch of expressions and words, but I still can't have the conversation because everyone spoke English too. And I was concentrating on French. So that was the season where I had a Swiss girlfriend and she taught me French. I helped her with English. And that really, really got me to a level where I could, by the end of the season, I was doing quite well in French.
Was one of the Hebrew expressions you learn, Ani lo medaber ivrit? I don't speak Hebrew.
I don't speak Hebrew.
Ani lo med ivrit.
Yes. Yeah, that's very good.
Thank you. I had a great time in Coral Beach. Loved that place.
Oh, you did Coral Beach. Okay.
Yeah, awesome. that was my last season. I want to ask you about culture shock, but you've traveled extensively before Club Med. I wonder if I should word it as, did you have any Club Med culture shock? Like I'll give you an example. Mine, for one, when I did my first New Year's Eve in St. Lucia, all the European men kissed me on the cheek, or a topless Geo in Turks and Caicos introduced herself to me on my first day, and I didn't know. Wow, I don't know. Did you have anything like that? Any kind of culture shock at all?
I would say, yeah, Cancun, yes, because it was a pretty crazy village. It was a singles village, mostly Californians, much more liberal than what I was used to on the East Coast of the U.S., which is much more conservative. So there was a lot more. Let's just call it PDA, public display of affection.
Yes, thank you.
A lot of, that I'll talk about an alcoholic drink called Sex on the Beach. You know what I'm talking about. So anyway,
yes.
A lot of stuff going on. And there were, the picnics were the old classic picnics.
Yes.
And I had gone on a couple.
Oh, really?
There was a section of the beach that was topless.
Yes.
And I had seen a topless beach in my travels. I think it was in Spain. So I got all my gawking out of the way. Yeah. But I think the biggest culture shock was assimilating into a GO team and what Club Med is and the culture of working and living in Club Med. So I think Cancun was the biggest shock. Other countries, every country has their own culture. So I learned a lot of different things. Nothing, I would say, more shocking than just trying to understand Club Med my first season.
Okay. I have another question. I have another question for you. This is the only time I've ever asked this question because you're the first gestionnaire, to come on the show. So I'm curious, of all the chiefs that you worked for, and I have a particular chief in mind, did you come across a chief that was nonstop, day and night, just thinking about ways to generate money for the village? Now, a lot of chiefs didn't do this. They were happy just to do a meet and greet, but did you ever encounter one that, just was so outlandish in his ideas just to get money pouring in every day? Did you ever come across a chief like this, and who was it?
So most chiefs, especially at the beginning, they couldn't care less about the gestion and the budgets, especially at the beginning.
Yes.
And once Club Med started to become a little bit more corporate, once the Trigonos handed it over to Bourguignon and handed it over to Henri Giscard d'Estaing, it became more and more and more corporate. And part of the Chief of Village training, starting in, I would say, mid-90s, was not only do you have to learn about the budgets, but you have to take it seriously. Because my first few chiefs couldn't care less, So the only one that really cared, but he was more about saving money than earning money. I guess I'm sure he had ideas about earning money, but he was much more about saving money, was Howard McCarley.
Okay.
And that's probably because, he's American, right? He is probably a little more conservative than your average chief of village. He spent a lot of time with me. He spent a lot of time checking out the budget, seeing where we're at, and making sure we didn't go over budget on the expenditure side. And he's the only one that really cared of all my years, even my last years. Whereas the other ones, I would show them, and they would like sign off on it without even looking. Or some of them toward the end, they would ask a few questions. But Howard was the only one that really had a true interest.
Okay, he cared, but he didn't. So you never came across someone that just was nonstop thinking about how to generate more. So you never worked with Denny M. Salem, then, I'm guessing.
I did not.
Okay.
I had an. We're not supposed to talk about anything negative, right?
No. Well, let me just say what Denis did, because you worked in Martinique, right?
I did not. No, I did a stage there. I did a stage there. They had all the gestionnaires of the zone.
Well, he looked. He's on the beach. He's at the sailing shack. He looks at all these boats in the water, all the planes flying overhead. He actually put the phone number of the village on the roof of the sailing shack, so the pilots could say, "You want to have a fun? Come stay." And he was going after church groups. He was always filling the village, even on days when there wasn't. So I was just curious if you came across anyone like that.
I did not. I tried to come up with some ideas, but I had to always run it through my controller, the gestion controller of the country. And so some of them were accepted and some of them were not. So, but I don't think I've ever had a chief. I mean, we had certainly at Sandpiper, the 2 times I was there. So one was with Howard. So he already had his things going. The other was with Jose Aliel, but they already had things going to generate more revenue than probably any other village that I've ever seen. Local revenue I'm talking about. I'd say Sandpiper is the most developed as far as that.
And did the infamous blacklist was that sprung from the gestion office?
That was way before me. I mean,
remember the blacklist?
Oh yeah,
I forgot.
Of course.
Okay.
Of course. And I had to deal with it.
Yeah,
I had to deal with it, and I had to explain to GOs why they're on the blacklist. And I had to show them their account and let them know what how long they had to wait and earn money so they can get off the blacklist. And and I had to learn how to be very diplomatic because I didn't want them to hate me.
Yes. Well, I don't know if it was you or another gesture when you would tell me about this thing happening and like, okay, thank you. You did a great season. You owe us $600. Like this happens, right? More so back in the day where, the GOs were spending it on cigarettes and bar beads or whatnot. So,
well, that's if they weren't cut off. So that was probably a gestion office that did not control the blacklist.
Yeah, exactly.
I was always taught to control it, and I learned very quickly how to be as diplomatic as possible and just show them. I mean, it's in black and white. Here's how much you spent. Here's how much you're earning so far. Okay, yeah, you can't leave here negative, so you have to earn this. You have to stay in the blacklist until the end of this month or next month or whatever, until you earn enough money to be there. And I would put it in such a way that they would understand, whether. Why they were on the back. They didn't like it, but they understood why they were. And I was like, just borrow money from people. I don't know.
Do you recall like you said at the beginning of this interview, you wanted to do shows, you like shows. Do you recall the first show you did?
The first show I did was in Sandpiper. Cancun, I got there kind of the middle of the season, so they already had all their shows there. And it was my first season. I was just trying to figure out what to do as a GO. So in Sandpiper, we did Grease. We put on Grease, and so I was as a GO show, not a GM show yet, because I know that they've been using Grease for years and years as a GM show. But this was a GO show, and I did that.
You were a T-Bird?
That was my first one. I was a T-Bird, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then we did Cats, and I was a cat.
Oh God!
And at the beginning, you're just one of many people on stage until you either develop a talent or they see a talent and then they'll put you into more prominent roles.
Yeah, I wish I'd
I was the narrator for Rocky Horror Picture Show, right?
Oh God, another one. Yeah.
That was awesome. Right. That was one of my favorites as the narrator with no neck.
You were witness to my first time on stage replacing Big Ed and as Rocky. Didn't know what was going on. Never seen Rocky Horror.
With a Speedo or something, right?
Yes, barely there. Yeah.
I tried not to look.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. But I was being pelted by toilet paper. So
Yes. Oh yeah. The New Yorkers, I think, had a special disdain for the narrator.
they hated it. Oh yeah, and I loved it. We had like there was like a net over it
Yes.
over the
Yes.
opening there, and I was like in a booth.
You were
And
getting
then somebody
pelted.
gave me, I think it was Freddie, who gave me a hockey stick.
Well, yes.
And so he had me use a hockey stick to defend myself.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Freddie, because he had the best system. He would have two in his hand. He would lob one very high to the New Yorker, and as the eyes were on it, then he'd zip the other one at his head, hit him right in the forehead.
Yeah, but he had a hockey stick, and he gave it to me so I can defend myself during the shows. So
all right,
that was great.
All right, let's get into the next important question. So from 88, I meet you in 94, because I had met Juka there. What season did you meet Juka?
So after Ars Eve, I followed my chief of village and my gestionnaire to Wengen in Switzerland.
Really? So you got two in a row?
I got a lot in a row, my friend.
Okay.
I got very lucky. So Wengen, I mean, and we'll get to Juka in just a second.
Yeah,
so Wengen was great because nobody spoke English. And so I went 5 months. I was the only American. I was the only native English speaking geo. I went basically 5 months only speaking French. And by the time I finished Wengen, my French was, for an American, as fluent as it's going to get. My gestionnaire didn't speak English, so it was perfect. And then I had a choice of going back to the American zone as a gestionnaire, because they felt that I had learned everything that they felt was enough, or I was proposed Bali as a gestionnaire. And at that time, I was still 20. I just turned 25. I was like, I want to go to Bali. I don't care about staying as a gestionnaire for another year. I want to go to Indonesia, right? So I went to Bali, did another 6 months there. I was starting to do the end of month closings, closing up the month while the gestionnaire was looking at me. So that way I have that real good practice. And I learned, basically everything else I needed to know, I guess. And then I was sent to Itaparica, and in Northeast Brazil. That's where I met Juka. So I have a very funny story, by the way. I have two funny stories.
I'd love
to hear one is my chief of village, who was in Ars Eve, who brought me to Wengen, really, really liked me. I mean, the chiefs liked me mostly because I was the only gestionnaire that would participate in animation. And so anyway, and I tried to do my work as well as I could. But anyway, so after Wengen, he took a summer off. I went to Bali with another chief, and then he asked me to go to Itaparica, and I didn't know it. I didn't know that he was the one who was asking me. But I had asked for Brazil because that was one of my dream places to go. And so I got there, and he's sitting there. When I get off the bus, he's there. I was like, "Oh, Chun-Chun," and I was very happy to see him. So funny story. He's taking me around the village the first day, walking around, introducing me to people. I got a little bit of culture shock in Brazil because I spoke no Portuguese, and 70% of the geo team are Brazilian, and most of them don't speak English. And so we get into the arts and crafts, and he introduces me to this beautiful young woman, geo, named Juka. And I said hello. I didn't know how to speak Portuguese, and then I looked up on the wall. And I said, I know that Perio. And so Tutuna was kind of translating, because by that time he had already done Rio das Pedras, so he spoke decent Portuguese. So he was translating to Juka, and she's translating back. And she said, "Oh, I painted it, 2 months ago." And I said, "Yeah, but I know the girl who made that whatever you call it, the template, the format or whatever, is Genevieve, a Swiss girl who I worked with in Israel." And she said, "Oh yeah, she was my boss last season in Rio das Pedras." So she gave me that template. I said, "Oh, she was my girlfriend 2 years ago in Ars Eve." And I'm saying this to my future wife.
Yep. Okay. And you still got her. God, man.
Genevieve she was already out of Club Med. I don't know where she was at the time. We had no internet at the time. I couldn't keep up with people, maybe by fax. But I wasn't faxing her anymore. I guess I had another girl.
No, but I'm wondering if mentioning that she was your girlfriend, if Juka was attracted to this or not. Like, I'm wondering. So was it? I don't know if it was love at first sight, but how did it progress?
So the story what she says is a couple of nights later, she saw me on the stage doing Crazy Signs, and and she found out from her friend that I was American and that I was going to have a high position or whatever, etc. A good person to know, that kind of thing. And so after Crazy Science, we're all hanging out at the bar, and she approached me and she said something to me. I had no idea what she said, and I kind of looked at her, and she repeated it. And so I said, "Hablas español?" Because with the Brazilians, if at the beginning, a lot of them speak like a Portuñol, the mix between Spanish and Portuguese. And she said yes. So we just started speaking a little bit in Spanish. And I said, "I'm really sorry, I don't understand Portuguese." And she said, "I was speaking English." And I said, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry."
Strike
said,
two.
"Well, I studied English."
Strike two.
Said,
okay. I'm not keeping count, but yeah, that's strike two.
She said, "I studied English in school." I said, "Well, your teacher must not have been very good." She said, I'll make you a deal." Now she was a little forthright at that time. Now this is the time of lambada. Remember lambada, the Brazilian dance?
Yes, I do. Yes.
She said, "If you teach me English, I will teach you lambada." And I looked her up and down. I said, "Yeah, let's start."
yeah. Do we need music or anything? Okay. What a deal.
So our relationship blossomed from there. Let's just call it that,
Okay. All right.
And by the way, she speaks excellent English now. My lambada is still terrible.
Okay. So Taparica was what year?
That was 1991.
Yeah, 91. So yes, I meet her in 94 with you, and yes, her English, I mean, from what I remember, was she was very fluent, right?
Yeah. Oh, today it's fantastic. I mean, this is many years later. Yeah. But yeah, so from there, a couple of months after I arrived, the gestionnaire was fired. He did something illegal, so he was fired, and I took over, and they brought in the new age gestion. So that was my first season as gestionnaire, and that was May of 1991.
Okay. And also there you met Joaquin Noah, the former NBA Chicago Bulls basketball player, right? He was 14 years old. That
was another that was later on.
Later on. Okay.
Yeah, he must have been like a baby at that time, because I met him in 99.
99. So, okay.
Yeah. So I did 18 years. So it's a long story. So anyway, and while we were in Itaparica the first season, there was the onset of the Gulf War, or the Persian Gulf War. And at that point, that's when they decided that everybody stays 1 year instead of 6 months. Okay, because at the time, everybody's moving every 6 months before them.
Wait a minute. So it was decided then. I was always curious when that started, the 1 year thing.
That's when it started, because of the Persian Gulf War, and about 35 Club Meds closed down for 6 months, and they lost a lot of money. They said, "Okay, we have to start cutting costs." So GOs travel every 12 months instead of every 6 months. You still get 2 weeks of vacation between this, every 6 months, but you have to go back to your village. And they only paid for our plane ticket back home once a year.
That's right.
So that those 2 weeks within the village, we fended for ourselves. I think you probably saw that as well in your time. Yeah. So I was psyched because I wanted to stay in Itaparica. At that time, they weren't allowing unmarried couples to travel together. And Juca was my first girlfriend that I really felt was something special. I had girlfriends in the other village, except for Cancun. All my other villages before I met her, I had a girlfriend for the season, but this was at a higher level. When you meet that special person, it's different. So we were really, really concerned about being separated. And when they announced that, it was like such a great celebration for us. So finished up the next season, and I let her know, let's work on your English, and most importantly, let's work on your French, because at the end of the year, let's try to get out of Brazil, because it's very tough for the Brazilian GOs to leave Brazil. Just like most local GOs of a lot of different countries.
And let's work on my lambada some more, right? Or did you already master the lambada, Steve?
By that time, actually, we got engaged by the end of the season.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So we got engaged by the end of the season. I wanted to hold on to this one.
How did you? Am I allowed to ask how you did the proposal, or no? It's okay if you don't want to talk about it. No,
I was not down on one knee.
Okay. She asked you?
No, I asked her, but we were lying in bed.
Got it. Understood. Okay.
Okay.
You just had a date. You're relaxing. Okay.
Something like that. Well, we were living together by that time. We were in the same room. So.
Okay. Nice.
So anyway, At the end of the season, so I really helped, between myself and then a few French GOs helped her, but I was with her, a lot more. And we just worked on French and just worked on her grammar and her accent and so that she could become somewhat fluent. And we let our chief of village know that, that we really wanted to go together. And so it worked out and they sent us to Playa Blanca and Greg Snyder's first season as chief, by the way.
Okay.
And yeah. And
well,
then
can I ask you a question about that? Is it true that Greg's right next to archery? Is it true that Greg Snyder built that outdoor hockey rink? Because that's what I heard when I was at Playa. So was that built during your time there or later? Do you know?
It sure was. And guess what the budget was for that?
I would love to know.
Didn't exist. So Greg arrived, and I feel confident that I can tell this story because I'm not embellishing anything. He arrived at the village with 2 paintball gun kits. So 2 guns with a bunch of pellets. Okay. and he bought that in LA before he flew down to Playa Blanca. And he brought me the receipt and he wanted me to reimburse him. And I said, is this a GM activity? He said, no, but we're going to phone, with the GOs, with my friends. I said, well, if it's a GM activity, maybe we can put it down as land sports, but I don't know if our insurance is going to cover it because I'm trying to be a good gestionnaire. And I said, if you get the okay from Ricardo Gonzalez, who was our country director, then I will gladly reimburse you and we'll put it under, whatever budget he tells me to put it under. But there is no budget for that. And especially if it's not a GM activity. Then a couple of months later, he came up with the idea with the street hockey rink. And I said, well, that sounds more normal. Okay. And it's for GMs. So, let's see how much it's going to cost. I do have to bring it up with the gestion controller of Mexico because there is no budget for it. But I think it's a great idea because we had a lot of Quebecois, a lot of Canadian GMs there and GOs. And so, we all agreed it was a great idea. And so we just got a budget. We sent it to Mexico City. They agreed and it was built. And it's a great activity. It worked out. I mean, I don't know how long it lasted there. I only did 1 season at Playa.
Can I guess the budget before you tell me?
I don't remember.
Oh, okay.
It was built by locals. So you can imagine it's just a bunch of cement. It is.
Well, it was I was there in 96, 97. It was still standing strong. So, it was well done, right. I'd say.
So 5 years later. Yeah. I mean, there were 10 or 15 local laborers working on it for, I don't know, a few weeks. And it was done. So you were asking me about the French versus the Quebecois situation for me, where I didn't know the difference because I didn't have enough French or practically anything, but Juca did. So here, this is pretty funny because the French that she learned in Brazil was from the French GOs and my slightly accented American French, but from France, right? She gets to Playa Blanca and she was in tears the first week. She said, I don't understand anything. And I had a tough time. And to me, it sounds like they're speaking French with a Texan accent.
Yes.
But after time, you understand it. But my French was much more fluent than hers. So it was easier for me to understand. But she was just starting to learn French and she thought she had it and she thought she was conversant, and she gets there and she was like, it all went backwards for her. But eventually she got the hang of it, and she did all right.
Wow. Yeah, no, this is a common thing because I remember when I got to Lindeman, my first meal with guests, I was with my Italian girlfriend and I was talking to Aussies and Kiwis and she saw me wincing, struggling to comprehend what they were speaking, and she turned white and I said, what's wrong? She goes, if you don't understand them, how the heck am I going to understand them?
Sure.
Of course. This is normal. And I thought I spoke English, but no, not when I went to Australia. No, didn't understand anything.
Yeah. So
Did you like Playa? Do you like Playa? Because everyone, I love Playa. Everyone seems to have a soft spot for Playa. Did you like it there?
I did. I'm going to say for me, it was average. Juca had 2 knee surgeries. No, she had 1 knee surgery while she was there. Her second was when she was a turquoise.
Really?
Yeah. So she had an accident. Yeah. She went to Sandpiper for that to get the surgery done in the States. So, anyway, she went when Ryan Leach went at the same time. They were both having knee surgery together.
Yes.
Remember when Ryan busted his knee playing volleyball?
Yes. Well, I remember Juca on roll. Like I'll get to that story but I remember Juca on rollerblades a lot that season in Turkey.
That's probably before the second surgery, or maybe it's after.
Yeah, because second
season.
I had
second season. It was after she recuperated.
Yeah, it was. Well, I had just arrived like around April or May, so I recall her vividly on rollerblades. Yeah. So her and Ryan had the same. Same surgery.
Yeah, and the same surgeon actually.
Wow. Okay.
And they had rooms next to each other in Sandpiper. Anyway, that's another funny story later on.
Okay.
So we were talking about Playa. So she had to go get knee surgery in Mexico City, and so she was on crutches the majority of the season. I had the room.
So Steve, was the Chief of Service room, your room, like really high up those stairs, side of the mountain? Was that where your room was?
All the way up top. In fact, the satellite dish was right in front of our door. So,
okay.
So she had to go hobble up and down those stairs in crutches. And there were, I don't know how many stairs there were. I was just terrible. But I enjoyed my time there. My second season as gestionnaire. We're both trying to figure out our jobs kind of thing. And one fun week we had was Atlantis. So Atlantis was there that year, that season. And but I wouldn't say that Playa was my favorite. No, it was like somewhere in the middle.
I was going to ask you this question at the end, but is it possible for all the years you did for you to have a favorite or a magical one? Is that even possible?
Itaparica, definitely Itaparica. And it's not only because I met Juca. It really changed a lot for me, to the Brazilian culture, the language, the music, the food. I just fell in love with Brazil. And I became a naturalized Brazilian citizen in 2003.
Oh, really?
Our second time in Brazil. Yes. Yeah. So it was just magic. And the village is the most beautiful that I've ever seen in the world. Not the best beach, that's turquoise, but the village is gorgeous. It was just magical.
Well, let's get back to it. I always think about fate. Now, when I was coming up the system, everyone wanted to go to Brazil, but they said, you'll never go. You have to speak Portuguese. So back then, was it easier, or it's because that you were the Gestión that was maybe the one position that was immune from that, or was it just different back then? I'm trying to think if had you not gone to Taparica, what would have happened? So
at the time, there were no Brazilian gestionnaires. Okay. Today, all four villages have local Brazilian gestionnaires, but at the time there had never been one, as far as I know, as far as what they had told me. But the chief of village asked me to come. That was Tutun, who was my chief in Arziv and Venga.
Okay.
So that's how I was able to go there.
Nice.
Also, the fact that I spoke fluent Spanish, so that's very, very helpful. Because it's very similar. Spanish.
How many languages do you speak now, Steve?
Just those four.
French,
English, Spanish,
okay.
And Portuguese.
Those are the main ones.
Okay. Yes. So, but it was definitely the most magical for me. So,
well, let's fast forward to Turks, because I just want to share with you, because you won't remember this, but I do. Since I was first season and I was green and wide-eyed, and you kind of actually took time to speak to me when not everyone did. I remember vividly. We were at the pool is when we were setting up the pool for dinner, and we were having the GM show at the pool. Do you remember those nights?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Juca was rollerblading around you. You had introduced me. She kept coming in and out. I forget what she was doing. And you were like basically telling me, you could do this job this way, you could do this job this way. Like, you actually opened my eyes to have fun, and if whatever you put into it, you'll get out of it. Yeah, no, you went on this long conversation, whereas no one actually had told me anything about that. So that's the very vivid memory I have of you. And I always remember that. This was a 94 and it's still with me.
Oh,
and,
cool.
and I took that going forward based on the words you told me. And then I became a chief of sports and whatnot, but I always had you, Steve Coe, in the back of my head.
Wow, that's really nice to hear. It really is.
No, it was very, very inspirational.
I guess for me, I started Club Med at a young age. I was 23. And working in an office and seeing everybody else out there having fun. And I like to have fun. And so I got involved with as much as I could. There was one time, actually in Arziv, where my gestionnaire went to the chief of village and said, this guy's spending more time on stage than helping me in the gestion office. Can we make a change? Because he's not doing me any good. And so Tutun called me into his office and he said, I'll tell you what, our animator just got hurt a couple of days ago. He's going to go home. Do you want to be animator or do you want to be a gestion? But if you want to stay as a gestion, take it more seriously. And so I stayed as a gestion.
Okay.
But who knows? I could have gone the animation route.
That's right. That's right. Did you ever flirt with wanting to be a chief of village?
Howard asked me once.
Okay.
And I said, I don't think it's my thing.
Okay.
Because since my position was so close, I worked a lot with chiefs of villages, and I saw the good, bad, and the ugly of what they had to deal with, and I wasn't sure it would be my thing. And this was confirmed in Itaparica my second time in 1999, when our chief Arnie Iolfi, who went on to be one of the directors in the Italy office, he had to go to a seminar in Paris for 4 days, 5 days, whatever it was. And he asked me to be chief of village. And I said, how about the chief of sports? How about the chief of animation? And he says, well, the chief of sports just got here last week. He doesn't speak Portuguese. The chief of animation, don't tell anybody, I'm getting ready to fire. And he said, who do you want me to put? Our 74-year-old econom or or whatever? He said, you're the best choice. Because I was already doing information meetings in 4 languages in Itaparica. So I was doing information meetings. So I was comfortable with the microphone. I was doing a lot of things on shows, and I would sing sometimes in shows. So he knew I was very comfortable with the microphone, and he knew I knew how to deal with the guests. And by that time, my Portuguese was very good. It was 9 years after I had met, or 8 years after I had met Juca, and we speak Portuguese basically, not 100% together, so I could practice. So I did 4 days or 5 days as chief of village, and I did not like it. So he came back, and I said, never again. Not my thing.
Well, he did have it. I mean, yeah, it wasn't your thing, but I do see the logic in his choice. With what he explained to you, you were the right choice, even though, you found out you were pretty sure it wasn't your thing, and then you found out it wasn't. Yes.
Yeah. I liked the stage part of it, and in the evenings and stuff like that. But I didn't like every single GO, GM, and GE coming up to me with their problems, and they wanting me to solve the problem right then and there before our chief came back home 4 days later. And it's some problems were easy, but a lot of problems were not for me to make that decision, because I was only interim for a few days. And it was just a bombardment of everybody coming to you. And I was like, this isn't for me. I like to have my private time a little bit.
Well, yeah. Well, speaking of the chief, so that was the time I liked, like, for you, like, kind of like how you inspired me. Was there any, like, to call out the people? Because we don't often take the time to call out people who made an impact. So was there anyone you worked with in your whole career in Club that you'd like to mention that, that affected you in a positive way? Any good memories with the chief? Or it could be a chief of service, anyone.
Right. So chiefs of village, I would say Jose Aliel Tutun. I did 3 seasons with him. Jean-Luc Olivero, who was a wonderful, wonderful, or he is, I assume he's still alive, wonderful, wonderful man. Jean-Pierre Grand, who we worked with together in Turquoise, but also I worked with him in Copper. Great people. Almost all my chiefs were fantastic people. Anik Radovic, she married Croatian, so it was Anik Renove when she was my gestionnaire, but she was my gestionnaire for 2 seasons. She really taught me a lot. So that's, she works in the Paris office still, I believe. So all of those people, and then there's others, friends, people like Eric Goldberg and Ross Friedman and Angie Boucher. Who am I thinking? Ryan Leach, people who became good friends that were never my bosses, but we became good friends because we hung out together or we worked together, closely together. So, and then a bunch of Brazilians that most of those names wouldn't make sense to anybody on this podcast. But a bunch of Brazilians, because I spent 8 years in Brazil afterwards.
Wow.
So my last, actually 7 years, 1 year back in 91. And then the last 7 years from 99 to 2006, I was in Itaparica and then Rio das Pedras.
Very nice.
So
you ready for some rapid fire questions?
Sure.
Favorite crazy sign of all time, if that's possible.
I always loved Sunlight of Tropic. And then the original crazy signs, Obal Masque.
Those
Those are favorite ones. I hated the Macarena.
But you did like the lambada, though, right?
Yeah, but that wasn't a crazy sign. That was a
the way I did it. It was okay.
Oh, okay. No, that one, not with me.
Do you have a favorite dumb question from a GM that you got during your time in Club Med? I'm trying to look for anything different than when's it going to stop raining? Is there one that stood out or no?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I was always called out to the reception because GMs would be angry and they would want to talk to the boss. So they would call me out and whatever their problem was, something specific. I don't know. I mean, there are so many stupid, petty questions. I mean, a lot of them were valid, but nothing really that stands out that I can think of right now. I could probably think of it after we get off the phone.
Okay. We'll keep going. Favorite animation passage. Do you have any? Does one stand out? Like, how Bam Bam used to do the Energizer Bunny and Rod. Is there any that stand out to you?
I used to love, because I worked with Bam Bam at least 3 or 4 seasons. So he was very, very creative. He was awesome. I used to get into the fruit passage where we would dress up and do crazy things. I remember at Arziv, we would dress up as like, I don't know, I want to try to figure out the nice way of saying it, as natives, let's call it that way, all painted up and with a long black wig and painted up like as a Native American, and running down with I guess these spears with our in one hand and then the platter of fruit on the other, and we would scare the hell out of the GMs and asking if they want fruit by grunting at them instead of speaking with them. I had a lot of fun with that until I got in trouble for it. But Bam Bam, I think, was the most creative animator, and his passages were amazing. Like walking into the, drumming as the Energizer Bunny into the ocean above his head, turning around and coming back.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw him do it off the dock too, like the water ski dock. He
probably, yes.
And the GM was thinking he'd turn around. He didn't turn around. He just walked off the pier.
Yes, no, he was great. He was great.
Boy, so much to ask you. Geez. Okay, so we mentioned that you met, because I'm curious about celebrities. So you hung out with Joaquin Noah, all right, who went on to become an NBA player with the Chicago Bulls. Any other celebrity encounters that you had?
So I'll tell you how that happened, actually. His father also was very famous, Yannick Noah.
Yeah, tennis
player, He was a famous French tennis player. Yeah, he won the French Open, the Roland Garros one time, and he was number one. He was ranked number one in doubles for some time. So he came with his, I don't know if you followed him since then, but he has a reggae band. I don't know if he still does, but he had a pretty famous reggae band, and they would travel the world and do shows. So he came to Itabarica with his band, and they put on shows at the nightclub maybe 3 times during that week. And he brought his 2 kids. So Joaquin was 14, I think, and then his sister, I forgot her name, who also became a high-profile basketball player. She was maybe 12, and they grew up in New York with Yannick. And for whatever reason, I don't know, I suppose they spoke French together, but he was looking for English-speaking people, and I was the only one. So somebody told me to go up to the bar and search him out. And he just wanted to, he said, well, when you're out of the office, I want to be able to hang out with you so I can talk English. So we spent, hours talking about everything, and mostly about New York, but it was pretty cool, and then he was a high school basketball player at the time, and he went on to be very, very famous. In Turquoise, we had that 70s week, so a lot of famous people there, the Village People, the guy who plays Greg Brady, the guy who played Arnold Horshack. Remember all them?
Ron Palillo. Wasn't that? That was my first season. That was my first season. I thought that was completely normal. I said, wow, every Club Med does this. I never had that ever again in 10 years. Like that whole Rhino Records celebration, whoever organized that, I mean, that was amazing. Like, but I thought that was perfectly normal. Like,
yes. We had a top model at the time named, also at Turquoise, named Ashley Richardson. Do you know that name?
Yes, I know the name.
You look her up. She was on the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issues for a few years in the early 90s. Yep. So in 94, she gets there with her mom on vacation, and she decides she wants to do arts and crafts with Juka. And so they're in there doing arts and crafts, Ashley and her mom goes into the closet and start taking out paint that Juka had not set out for the GMs, like stock paint or something like that. And Juka saw her and said, excuse me, you can't go in there. What are you looking for? And I can get it for you, kind of thing, right? The GMs weren't supposed to go into their reserve, kind of thing. And then she caught her mother stealing a paintbrush because they were doing the silk painting, like they needed money, right? Ashley was a very, very wealthy. And so she caught her and she said something. And she said, I just saw you put those two paintbrushes or paintbrush, whatever, in your bag. I need that. That's our equipment here. And so Ashley went up to her, and she's like 6'1". Juka's 5'6" or 5'7". And she said, do you know who I am? And Juka looked up at her and said, no, do you know who I am? I want that paintbrush back. So Ashley Richardson went off and complained to the chief of village, who, tried to teach Juka how to be a little more diplomatic, but whatever. That's a funny story about her.
I thought also, you were going to, when you said that Ashley Richardson went into arts and craft, I thought you were going to say, and suddenly all the Geo men had a keen interest in arts and crafts. That's where I thought the story was going. It went a different direction, which is just as good. So, okay.
Also in Itaparica, we had a famous Formula One driver, Rubens Barrichello. Do you know the name?
Yeah,
follow Formula One.
Very famous. Yeah.
So he was there. He spent a week there. We actually had a conversation because we were watching a show, and I guess my Juka and our son Nicholas, who was a baby at the time, and I were in one row at the back of the theater, and he was right in front of us or right behind us, and he mentioned the baby, and so we started having a little conversation. So I spoke with him for a few minutes. There was the one and only, or I don't know if they ever did it again, Brazil Tennis Open that was played very close to Itaparica, but a few of the tennis players stayed at Club Med. So Monica Seles was there, and so I met her. She didn't have much to say. Do you remember her?
Yes. Oh yeah.
Yeah, very, very famous. So I spoke with her a little bit, but she's not as open and friendly as some of the other people. Those are the ones that come to mind.
Now, in your intro, you said that you are the longest serving American in your position in the history of Club Med. Now, are you sure there's not a Geo ping pong out there that's been working 20 years? Like, are we sure of this?
No, in my position, I said. Yeah. In my position.
Oh, no, I was just making a joke that didn't land. Okay. So okay. So longest serving American
gestionnaire.
Okay. 18 years. Wow.
Yeah. So, well, I did 12 years as gestionnaire. So that's what I was referring to.
Okay.
So I did a season as stage. I did 5 seasons as aid gestion. And then after, 2002 to 2006, I was regional controller for Brazil for the 3 Club Meds in Brazil. Now there are 4.
Oh, really?
For 12 of those, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Based in Rio, but although we lived in Rio das Pedras, but I was part of the Rio office at the time. But I go back to Sandpiper from time to time, and somebody was there from, I think Howard was there visiting, or was teaching a stage or something like that. And we're just talking about that. He said, definitely there's never been an American gestionnaire that is, since you left, that has been even close, even 5 years. Kevin Klein did for a while. Gennarda Harris did for a while. There are a few others. Mark Gerwitz did before me. And the few others, I'm sorry for forgetting your names, whoever's listening to the podcast. But, since Howard was in recruitment and in HR in the Miami office for so many years, he confirmed that to me after that conversation. And the reason why is because, once you do a job like that, for those who are really looking to earn money, you can go back home to the US and make 50 times that money doing the same work, in a corporation somewhere,
Yeah. Your office was
American gestionnaires didn't stay.
Yeah, exactly. Let me ask you something about this position, because it's something I've always wondered. Every job, no matter how great, there's always a part that you might not like as much. So what was either the hardest part of your job or less agreeable? Was it your quarterly year end? Like what part of the job was so taxing or just took forever to do, balancing? Like what was it exactly?
So yeah, the fin de saison, the end of the season reports, especially at the beginning when they were done by hand before they were done by computer, it took 10 days to do. These days it probably takes 2 days.
Yeah.
The end of months, it took 5 days, where these days it probably just takes a day or 2. So that was a pain. And I enjoyed it because we wanted to see what the results were, of course. But during that time, I didn't do any shows. I had to basically work 10 hours a day in the office or 12 hours a day in the office. So those time periods I had to take off from the shows. So that was a little frustrating. And, I want to go out and have fun like I always like to do. But I was also interested in seeing what the financial results were and all that. anything that I really didn't like, sometimes in smaller villages, you're also in charge of human resources, and that includes the GEs. Back then, they used to call them PS. It wasn't really, I didn't have much training in it, so it really wasn't my thing. And you'd end up getting more complaints about working conditions more than anything else. And I was very young, like in Wengen. Oh my God, I was 25 years old, and my gestionnaire had me in charge of the GEs. And they would have their situations and problems and questions, and it just didn't appeal to me.
Okay,
that part of it.
Wow. Well, we've been talking some time, but you have such an interesting career. I think this can go on another 4 hours, but yeah, I don't want to start your day. But before I let you go, I mean, I know we covered a lot, but I don't want to let you go unless there's a story you haven't told me. There's something you wanted to say, like now's your time, like because you've been so kind with your time. I don't want you to leave if we forgot something. But did we cover get most of it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple little stories that are humorous to people who know these people. These are people who are well known that I can just quickly say.
Yeah, sure.
My first time in Sandpiper when I was 23 or whatever. After the hurricane in Cancun. One thing I learned from the French, especially French gestionnaires, is they drink a lot of espresso. So I kind of hooked onto that. And so we would have our mid-morning espresso at the bar. And so I went there and I was sitting down there. And I guess my gestionnaire was speaking with the econom or something like that at the time. And then this guy sits next to me, probably 50 years old, curly grayish hair, open, like a plaid shorts and unbuttoned open, what do you call it, flowered like a Hawaiian shirt and a straw hat. All right. And his belly's sticking out, a pretty predominant belly. And and he sits next to me and he says hello. And I say hello. And I'm trying to be a good GO and trying to, hey, how you doing? How long you been here or whatever. He said, oh, I just got in today. I said, great. Looks like you're comfortable now. He said, yeah. I said, how long you staying? He said, oh, only 4 days. And I already judged from his accent that he wasn't American. I said, oh, where are you from? He said, England. And let me know when you know who this is, by the way. And
not yet.
some of the older GOs will know. And he says from England. And I said, okay. And you flew in from another city, or like you had business elsewhere, or you have business around here? He said, no, I just flew in from Europe this morning, actually, or last night, or whatever it was. And I said, and then in 4 days you're going to go do business like in Miami or something, or what? And he said, no, I'm actually going to do business, but I'm going to Dominican Republic. I said, oh, we have a Club Med in Dominican Republic. I said. He said, yeah, I know. Punta Cana. I said, yeah. And he said, yeah, that's where I'm going. I said, well, wait, you just said you're going there for business. He said, well, yeah, I'm going to work there. And I looked at him and I said, you're a GO? Like that, very sarcastic. He said, yes. I said, what do you do? He said, chief of village. So this is Mike Coltman. If you don't know him, I'm sure you've heard of him.
Yeah, I've definitely heard of him. Yes.
And so he was playing me big time. All right. And because my other chiefs were always very well dressed and very proper and very, I don't know. And this, of course, he was on vacation. So I can't fault him, but he was playing me big time. And it was just hilarious. And I bumped into him, I don't know, 8 years later. And I recounted the story and he remembered. And it was just pretty funny. And then the last thing I want to say, because I know we're probably out of time, is a very, very recent run-in with an ex-GO who you probably know, and a confusion that my wife had. So my wife and I recently, it was about a year ago, we were in Hilton Head Island, South Carolina, on vacation. And we're sitting at a bar, like a beach bar. And there's a whole bunch of beach volleyball games going on. And the guy who's running it, and it was far away. I didn't have my glasses on. I use my glasses for long distance and driving. So I didn't have my glasses on. And she said, that's Scott Smith over there. Do you know who Scott Smith is? Do you remember his name?
Yeah, yes.
Big water ski, right?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Chief of water ski for many years. She says, that's Scott Smith. I said, oh, that's cool. Let's go talk to him. So we went over there and I'm looking at him. I'm like, that's not Scott. I know that's not Scott. And she's like running up ahead of me. And she said, Scott. And the guy looked at him and he says, I'm not Scott. And I realized who it was. And I didn't want to say anything. because I wanted to see how far she went with this. She said, "I know you." He says, "Juka, I know you too. Hey, Steve." And she says, "You're not Scott." And he says, "No, I'm Fifth. You know Fithian?"
Yes. Okay.
So he lives on Hilton Head Island. So we saw him last year.
I
Let's
think
confuse it for Scouts.
I think we're gonna have to send Juka to the optometrist as well here.
Well, after 25 years, and people change a little bit, but
That's
Fifth
right.
has not changed a bit. Fifth looks exactly the same. He really does. He runs.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just saying he owns a smoothie shop, and he runs beach volleyball tournaments in the Hilton Head.
Gee, sounds just like Club Med.
Yeah, exactly.
Will you permit me one last question?
Of course.
I usually like to ask this question last. So if there's any potential geo listening to this or is on the fence about applying, should they apply? Should they try it?
Oh my God, absolutely. I would do it all over again in a flash. In fact, we would not have left if our son didn't become school age, because he grew up his first 7 years of his life in Itaparica and Rio de Pedras in Club Med. And we only left because he had to have a real life and go to school and all that instead of homeschooling. But we would have stayed forever. If I was back in 1988, I would do it all over again. Absolutely. Yep. It's a great career. It's an amazing opportunity. I know it's changed, it evolved, and it changed in the decades, but it's still amazing. Absolutely.
Well, there you have it. Thanks so much, Steve. I hope I didn't keep you too long, but you're just so damn interesting, and you got so many great stories. I hope it's okay of me to keep you so long, but I really do thank you.
It's not a problem at all. It's my pleasure.
What are the odds?
My pleasure. Great catching up with you as well.
Yes, thank you. You too. What are the odds of getting Juka on this show? Next to none. Any hope there?
She's a little bit more shy than I am as far as
got
stuff
it.
Like that. I'm not sure.
Will you please tell her I say hello? Will you please
I will. I'll talk.
Give her my best.
I'll tell you what. I'll talk to her about it. Once this is published, I will. I'll have her listen. Of course, I would have her listen anyway, and I will let her know that you have invited her.
Yes, she has a standing invitation.
Yes, but she remembers you fondly as well. I mentioned to her that I'm doing this. She's not with me right now, but I let her know that we're doing this, and she remembers you. So she might surprise me and say yes. Who knows?
Sweet, thank you.
Yeah, and I wish you were going to Turquoise for the big XGO reunion.
Yeah. Like I said, I follow the academic calendar now, guys. I had the exciting job. Now I have the boring job. But I hope you guys have
first time going in probably 15 years. We went to one in Sandpiper. I don't know when it was, about 2007, 2008, right after we left Club Med. And we've never gone since to an XGO reunion. So we're really excited. Sweet.
This will air, but so I assume you had a good time. This will air after you're back. So we'll have to catch up on that too.
Yes. Oh, of course. Yes. This is not the end of our conversation, right?
No. I'm going to be contacting you again. Steve,
that's awesome. Anytime.
Thanks
and
again.
If I ever get up to Montreal, we'll hang out.
You better call me.
All right.
Everyone, that was
all the best,
Steve, and we thank you again for your time. We'll see you all next week. Say bye, Steve.
Bye. Thanks.